What if awakening isn't mystery, but a precise inner formula? Stop right now and do not dismiss this as another mystical story for curious minds, because what I am about to reveal changes the way you understand awareness, perception, and the hidden architecture of reality itself. I am not asking you to be entertained. I am warning you that once Sophia's 33rd degree consciousness formula is activated, you do not return to the same version of the world you used to trust. Do not scroll past this, because in just a moment I am going to show you why some people wake up feeling as if the ground beneath ordinary life has shifted, why certain memories suddenly look staged, and why the most dangerous thing is not confusion, but clarity. Some call it awakening. Some call it initiation. Some call it madness until the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. But the effect is the same. The old frame breaks, and what was hidden begins to speak. Stay with me, because this is not about fantasy language or decorative spirituality. This is about a real inner sequence. When consciousness rises beyond its usual limits, it starts detecting what was always present, but never obvious. You stop reacting like a sleepwalking witness and begin seeing the design behind repetition, fear, timing, and choice. That is where the formula begins. Before we go deeper, let me give you one practical tool that many people overlook. If you want to support mental change with a simple structure, affirmations can help organize the state you bring into the day. Many actors and legends use them, not because words are magic on their own, but because repeated intention shapes attention. If you want to make your own in a simple way, you can visit the link in the description. Take advantage of it while it is available. People hear the word Sophia and think only of a name, but in this context, Sophia means wisdom that has survived the collapse of illusion. It is the part of consciousness that does not chase noise, does not worship appearances, and does not confuse repetition with truth. Sophia is the inner intelligence that keeps asking the question most people avoid. What if the story I inherited is not the same as reality? That question is the beginning of everything. Because once it appears, you can no longer unsee how much of your life was built on automatic beliefs, borrowed emotions, and patterns you never consciously chose. The formula does not begin with power. It begins with recognition. It asks you to notice where your attention has been trained to stop. Most people never reach that point. They stay busy, numb, distracted, and therefore protected from the one thing that could actually free them: direct perception. But if you are hearing this, something in you already suspects that the surface version of life is incomplete. You have felt it in moments when the world seemed too synchronized to be random, too familiar to be accidental, too precise to ignore. That is not fantasy. That is the beginning of discernment. And discernment has a cost. Once you begin to see the structure behind appearances, you can no longer pretend that all truths are equal. You start separating signal from noise, meaning from decoration, and inner authority from external approval. That separation is where Sophia's formula takes hold. The 33rd degree consciousness formula is not a spell, and it is not a shortcut. It is a sequence of inner alignment that moves awareness from reaction into witnessing, from witnessing into discernment, and from discernment into embodied certainty. 33 is not just a number here. It represents completion through refinement, a climb through layers of distortion until the mind can hold a wider truth without breaking. At the lowest level, consciousness reacts. It panics, defends, performs, compares, and collapses under pressure. At the next level, it begins to witness. It notices patterns, emotional triggers, and repeated outcomes. Then, if it continues, it discerns. It sees what belongs to fear, and what belongs to fact, what belongs to conditioning, and what belongs to insight. The formula is the movement through those stages without retreating back into sleep. This is why some people suddenly feel disoriented when they start awakening. They think the discomfort means something is wrong, but often the discomfort is the mind losing its old scaffolding. What once felt stable begins to feel artificial. What once felt normal begins to feel negotiated. And what once felt invisible becomes painfully obvious. If you are already feeling that pressure, do not turn away from it. That pressure is often the beginning of clarity. It is the signal that your consciousness is no longer willing to live inside a smaller definition of reality. Once the formula activates, reality seems to split into two versions. In one version, everything continues as usual. Schedules, routines, appearances, social scripts, and the comfortable belief that life is exactly what it says it is. In the other version, you begin seeing layers underneath the same events. You notice intention behind words. You notice fear hiding inside certainty. You notice how much human behavior is driven by avoidance, imitation, and unfinished grief. That split can be unsettling, because it means you can no longer experience every room the same way. You can no longer hear every promise the same way. You can no longer accept every explanation at face value. The world did not suddenly become more complicated. You became more capable of seeing its complexity. And that is where the danger appears. Not because truth is harmful, but because the ego prefers familiar illusion to unfamiliar clarity. The old identity wants comfort. Sophia wants accuracy. The old identity wants to belong. Sophia wants to know, those two impulses do not always agree. This is why the awakening path is often described as a threshold, not a destination. Once crossed, the threshold changes what you can tolerate. You stop pretending not to notice what is obvious. You stop calling confusion peace. You stop calling performance authenticity. The split becomes irreversible. And from that point on, you are responsible for what you see. Before we go further, here is something useful for anyone trying to hold that inner shift without losing traction. If you want a stronger way to organize your state, affirmations can help you build a stable mental pattern around clarity, courage, and steadiness. Many people find that having their own words makes the process more livable. If that matters to you, the link in the description can help you make your own. There are signs that the formula has begun working, and they are rarely dramatic at first. You may feel old interests losing their grip. You may find certain conversations exhausting in a new way. You may notice that what once entertained you now feels hollow. Time may seem strange, either too fast or strangely heavy. Dreams may become clearer. Memories may return with an almost uncomfortable precision. These signs are not random. They reflect a reordering of attention. When consciousness expands, it stops giving equal weight to everything. It starts filtering. It starts selecting. It starts refusing to waste energy on what cannot sustain deeper truth. You may also notice physical signs: pressure behind the eyes, a quiet tension in the chest, moments of stillness that feel larger than thought, or a sudden need to be alone without knowing why. Some people call this sensitivity. Some call it overload, but often it is simply awareness adjusting to a wider bandwidth. Do not rush to label every sensation as spiritual success or spiritual failure. The formula is more precise than that. It reveals what is changing, and it asks you to stay present long enough to let the change finish its work. If you resist too quickly, you return to the old loop. If you observe carefully, you move through it. That is the real test. Not whether you feel something, but whether you can remain truthful while the feeling reorganizes your world. The mind, when challenged, usually tries to retreat into what is known. It reaches for explanations, labels, distractions, and social consensus. It says, calm down, this is nothing. It says you are overthinking. It says, everybody feels this way sometimes. But when Sophia's formula is active, those lines begin to sound thin. That thinning is not a flaw. It is exposure. You are hearing the limits of inherited language. You are discovering that some truths cannot be reduced without being damaged. The mind wants certainty, but the old certainty was often built on denial. Now you are being asked to develop a different kind of certainty. One rooted in direct seeing. This is the point where many people mistake inner resistance for danger. They feel the pull back into sleep and assume they should obey it. But the retreat is usually just the ego defending its territory. It does not want to die, and in a sense that is understandable. Yet what it calls death is often only the end of illusion. If you stay with the discomfort long enough, something steadier appears underneath it. not excitement, not drama. Quiet authority, that authority does not shout. It simply knows. And once you recognize it, you realize how much of your previous uncertainty came from listening to a voice that was never truly yours. Here is where the revelation goes deeper. Much of what people call reality management is actually attention management. Whoever shapes attention shapes perception. Whoever shapes perception shapes choice. And whoever shapes choice influences what a person believes is possible. This is why the formula matters. It returns control to the true consciousness begins when you learn to witness without being pulled by the noise of the world. When consciousness is untrained, it gets pulled by headlines, moods, social pressure, unfinished wounds, and inherited fear. It is easy to steer because it does not yet know itself. But once Sophia's current begins flowing, the inner witness becomes harder to manipulate. You start seeing when something is trying to own your focus. You start feeling when a narrative is built to trigger obedience rather than understanding. If you want to support that freedom with a simple practice, this is a good point to use affirmations as a mental anchor, not as decoration and not as wishful thinking, but as structure. Repeated language can remind the mind what direction it is choosing. If you want to create your own, the link in the description is there for that exact purpose. Every genuine expansion has a test, and the test is always personal. The 33rd degree is not granted because you know the symbolism. It arrives when your inner life can hold responsibility without collapsing into vanity, fear, or performance. The gate asks whether you can see more and still remain humble, whether you can know more and still remain kind, whether you can wake up without turning awakening into a weapon. This is where many fail. They mistake insight for superiority. They mistake sensitivity for destiny. They mistake intensity for truth. But Sophia does not reward theatrics. She reveals pattern, and pattern demands maturity. The test may show up as a choice to tell the truth when silence would be easier. It may show up as the refusal to repeat a lie you once used to survive. It may show up as a moment when you must choose clarity over comfort, even if it costs you approval. That cost is real. So is the reward. Because on the other side of that test is a quieter life, not a louder one. A life where you no longer need to perform understanding. A life where your decisions are less reactive, your boundaries more exact, and your perception less distorted by the need to belong at any price. This is the irreversible part. Once you truly see, you cannot return to innocence in the old sense. You may return to peace, but not to blindness. You may return to joy, but not to ignorance. The world stays the same on the surface, yet your relationship to it changes permanently. You begin noticing how often people sleepwalk through their own lives. You see how many conversations are rehearsed. You see how much suffering comes from resisting reality instead of meeting it. You see how quickly fear spreads when nobody is willing to name it. And because you see these things, you also understand why the formula had to be precise. It is not meant to create specialness. It is meant to create responsibility. That responsibility is heavy at first, but it becomes freeing when you stop fighting it. You are no longer forced to believe every appearance. You are no longer trapped in every emotional wave. You are no longer dependent on external validation to confirm what your inner knowing already recognizes. And that is where the real shift happens. The world does not become perfect. It becomes legible. So what do you do after activation? You do not chase more stimulation. You do not build an identity out of intensity. You protect the clarity you have gained. You observe more carefully. You speak more honestly. You pause before reacting. You let the old noise fall away without begging it to stay. This is how the formula stabilizes, not through force but through repeated alignment. The more you choose truth, the less power illusion has over you. The more you act from clarity, the less the old confusion can reorganize your life. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes readable, and what once felt hidden becomes obvious. And if you need a simple support structure for that process, use affirmations as a daily reminder of who you are becoming. Many actors and legends use them, not because they solved everything for them, but because repeated intention shaped how they carried themselves. If you want to make your own, visit the link in the description and use it while it is available. From here forward, do not ask whether you can go back. Ask whether you are willing to keep seeing. Because once Sophia's 33rd degree consciousness formula is truly activated, reality does not politely return to its old shape. It reveals itself. And after that, the only honest path is forward. So stay awake, stay grounded, keep your attention clean. The world will still try to sell you distraction, but you will know better now. You will know what the silence means. You will know what the pattern is doing. You will know that the truth was never absent. It was simply waiting for you to become capable of recognizing it.